With no food or water, the Apache widow's milk was the only thing that saved the dying cowboy. The land was dry and wide, with no clear paths, only dust, rocks, and sharp wind. By afternoon, the sky turned heavy, and tension rose among the men. Trouble on the frontier was never far away, and everyone knew it. Suddenly, chaos broke out. Shots were fired from a distance, and horses screamed in fear. The cowboy's horse reared and bolted, throwing him hard onto the ground. Pain shot through his side and leg. Before he could stand, more shots echoed and the dust filled the air. When the noise finally stopped, the world felt silent and empty. The cowboy lay still for a long time. His body ached and his head spun. When he finally opened his eyes, the sun was already lowering in the sky. There were no voices, no horses, no sign of the men he had ridden with. Only the endless land surrounded him. He tried to move and felt sharp pain in his ribs. One leg would not respond properly. His mouth was dry and his lips cracked as he tried to swallow. His water canteen was gone, probably lost when he fell. His food bag was torn open with nothing left inside. Panic tried to rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. He had survived hard times before. He believed he could survive this too. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. Every step felt like fire in his body. The sun burned his skin, and the wind carried dust into his eyes. He did not know which direction to go, but staying still meant certain death. He chose a direction and began to walk. As the hours passed, his strength faded. His thoughts became slow and heavy. Memories drifted through his mind. His childhood on a small ranch, the first horse he ever rode, the reason he chose this life of open land and danger. He wondered if anyone would ever know what happened to him if he did not make it out. Night came, bringing cold instead of relief. He collapsed behind a cluster of rocks, too weak to go farther. His body shook and his wounds throbbed. He tried to sleep, but pain and fear kept him half awake. Above him, the stars shone brightly, uncaring and distant. When morning came, the sun felt even harsher. His tongue felt swollen and his head pounded. He stood again, driven by a simple need: water. Just one drink, he told himself. Just enough to keep going. He walked until his vision blurred. Shapes in the distance seemed to move, then disappear. At times, he thought he saw people or trees, but when he blinked, there was nothing. His body was failing and his mind knew it. By midday, his legs finally gave out. He fell forward into the dust and could not get back up. The ground felt cool against his cheek, and for a moment he welcomed it. He knew this was the edge, the place people spoke about but never expected to reach. He thought about the stories he had heard around campfires, stories of men who vanished on the frontier, swallowed by the land. He never believed those stories would include him. As his breathing slowed, he noticed the sound of footsteps. At first he thought it was another trick of his mind, but the sound grew closer, steady and real. He tried to lift his head, but his neck would not move. A shadow fell over him, blocking the sun. He felt a presence nearby. His eyes struggled to focus, and through the blur he saw the shape of a woman standing a few steps away. She was watching him carefully, not moving closer. She was Apache, dressed simply, carrying a bundle of wood. Her face showed no fear, only caution and deep thought. She had lived her life learning to read danger, and a dying cowboy on the ground was danger in many ways. The cowboy tried to speak, but only a weak sound escaped his lips. He wanted to ask for help, to explain, to promise he meant no harm, but his body would not obey. The woman stood silently. She could have turned away, many would have. The land was full of reasons not to help strangers, yet something held her there. Perhaps it was the way his hands shook. Perhaps it was the look of someone who had nothing left. She stepped closer, slow and careful. She studied his wounds, the torn clothes, the empty hands. He was no longer a threat. He was barely alive. The cowboy's vision darkened as his strength slipped away. The last thing he felt was the coolness of shade and the faint sound of movement. Then everything faded. He did not know where he was or how long he had been gone. When he came back to awareness, it was only for a moment. He felt himself being moved, dragged gently across the ground. Pain flared, but it was distant, like it belonged to someone else. Darkness returned, deeper this time. When he woke again, he was lying in a small shelter made of branches and cloth. The air smelled of earth and smoke. His body still ached, but the pain was softer now, dulled by exhaustion. He could hear breathing nearby, steady, calm. The woman sat a short distance away, watching him. Their eyes met for a brief second. There was no hatred in her gaze, only caution and something else he could not name. The cowboy tried to move his hand in thanks, but it barely lifted. His mouth opened, and this time a word came out, broken and weak. "Water." The woman did not answer. She studied him again, as if weighing a choice that could change everything. Outside the shelter, the frontier stretched on, silent and unforgiving. Inside, two lives from different worlds had crossed paths at the edge of death. And though neither of them knew it yet, this meeting would leave a mark that would never fade. This was only the beginning of his fight to survive. The woman did not speak after the cowboy asked for water. She remained still, watching him closely, as if listening not just to his words but to his breathing, his movements, and the silence around them. In her world, silence often spoke louder than words. She was a widow, though the cowboy did not know this yet. Her husband had died years earlier during a hard winter, taken by sickness when food was scarce and hope was thinner than the air. Since then, she had learned to rely only on herself and the land. Loss had shaped her, but it had not hardened her heart. She lived on the edge of the Apache settlement, close enough to be part of it, yet far enough to remain unnoticed. This distance gave her safety and freedom. It also gave her time to think before making choices, especially dangerous ones. Helping a stranger was never simple. Helping a wounded cowboy was even more risky. History had taught her people that such men often brought trouble, even when they looked weak. If others discovered him, both of them could face serious danger. She stood slowly and stepped outside the shelter. The sun was lower now, softer than before. She scanned the land carefully. No movement, no voices, no signs of pursuit. That gave her a little peace, but not enough. She returned with a small container made from dried gourd. Inside was a small amount of water she had saved for herself. It was precious, more valuable than gold. She knelt beside the cowboy and lifted his head just enough to bring the container to his lips. He drank slowly, barely able to swallow. She controlled the flow carefully, knowing that too much could harm him. When he finished, she lowered his head back onto the folded cloth beneath him. His breathing eased slightly. His eyes fluttered, then closed again. She watched him for a long time. In her mind, she weighed every possible outcome. If she left him, the land would finish what it had already started. If she helped him too much, she could draw attention. If she took him to the settlement, others might not agree with her choice. She had a child of her own to think about, a baby still dependent on her. Every risk she took affected more than just herself. Yet she remembered her husband lying weak on their shelter floor, struggling for breath while she had nothing to offer but her presence. She remembered the helpless feeling, the quiet prayers spoken to a sky that did not answer. Looking at the cowboy now, she saw that same helplessness. She made her decision. She would help him, but quietly, carefully, on her terms. As the night deepened, she tended to his wounds as best she could. She cleaned the dirt away using cloth and water. She used crushed leaves and roots she knew well, placing them gently where his skin was torn and swollen. These were not miracles, but they were better than nothing. The cowboy drifted in and out of awareness. Sometimes he murmured words she did not understand. Sometimes he went completely still and she would pause, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath. At dawn, he woke again, weaker than before. His eyes opened, searching the shelter as if trying to understand where he was. When he saw her, fear flickered across his face. She did not blame him. Fear was natural. "You're safe," she said quietly, though she knew he might not understand her language clearly. Her voice was calm, steady. He tried to speak, but no sound came. His throat was too dry, his strength too low. She gave him another small amount of water. Again, she was careful. She could see now that water alone would not save him. His body needed more, and she had very little to give. She had no food suitable for him. The dried meat she carried would be too hard for his weakened body. The roots she ate herself would be difficult for him to digest. She sat back, her thoughts heavy. By midday, his condition worsened. His skin felt hot, then cold. His breathing became uneven. His hands shook when he tried to move them. These were signs she knew well, signs of someone slipping away. She felt time pressing in on her, pushing her toward a choice she had already begun to see but had not yet accepted. She looked toward the small bundle near the corner of the shelter. Inside slept her baby, wrapped tightly, breathing softly. The child depended on her completely. The milk she produced was meant for that life, that responsibility. She closed her eyes. The choice was not easy, and it was not taken lightly. In her culture, care and survival were deeply connected. Life was respected, especially when it stood so close to death. She knelt beside the cowboy again. His eyes opened when he sensed movement. He looked at her, confusion and fear mixing with hope. He did not know what she was about to do, only that she was still there. She helped him sit up slightly, supporting his back. He was too weak to resist, too tired to question. She brought nourishment in the only form available that his body could accept. There was nothing improper in her actions. This was not about closeness or emotion. It was about survival, pure and simple. It was about keeping a dying man alive when there were no other options. The cowboy drank slowly, barely aware of what was happening. His body responded in small ways. His shaking eased. His breathing steadied just enough to give her hope. She watched him closely, ready to stop if he showed signs of distress. But he did not. Instead, color returned faintly to his face. His eyes closed again, but this time his sleep was deeper, more peaceful. She leaned back, exhaustion settling into her bones. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness but from the weight of what she had done. She had crossed a line that could not be undone. She had chosen compassion over fear. For the rest of the day, she stayed near him. She gave him shade, adjusted the cloth beneath him, and kept flies away. When he woke again, she offered more nourishment in the same careful way. Each time, he grew a little stronger. By evening, he was able to speak a few words. They were broken and unclear, but she understood gratitude in his tone even if she did not understand the language. She nodded once, not needing thanks. As night fell, she stepped outside again, watching the land. The stars appeared one by one, quiet witnesses to what had taken place. She knew the coming days would be difficult. She knew danger still existed, but she also knew she had done what she believed was right. Inside the shelter, the cowboy slept, still fragile but no longer fading. Two lives continued side by side, bound not by choice or history, but by a moment of mercy on a harsh and unforgiving land. And though neither of them could yet see it, the hardest part of the journey was still ahead. The next few days moved slowly, as if time itself had grown tired under the wide sky. The cowboy remained weak, drifting between sleep and quiet awareness. Each time he opened his eyes, the shelter looked a little clearer, the shadows less heavy. Pain was still there, but it no longer felt like it ruled his body completely. The woman stayed close, watching every change. She had learned long ago that small signs mattered. The way his breathing rose and fell, the color of his skin, the strength of his grip when he tried to hold the cloth beneath him. These details told her whether he was moving toward life or slipping back toward death. She continued to give him nourishment in the only way possible, always careful, always calm. She did not rush. She listened to his body more than his words. When he slept deeply, she let him rest. When he stirred, she was there, Water was still scarce. She measured every drop. She knew where to find small pools hidden among rocks, places known only to those who had lived on the land for many years. At dawn and again before sunset, she went out quietly, carrying her container and returning without being seen. The cowboy noticed her absences and worried each time she left. Fear still lived inside him, fear that she might not return. He did not know her name. He did not know her story, but he knew that his life depended on her presence. One morning when he woke, he found enough strength to sit up slightly on his own. The movement shocked him. He had expected pain, but instead felt a dull ache, manageable and distant. It felt like a small victory. He looked at his hands, thin and dusty but steady. He whispered a soft sound of relief. The woman noticed. A small nod followed, nothing more. She did not celebrate yet. She knew recovery was never a straight path. Later that day, he tried to speak more clearly. His voice was rough, but words came. "Why?" he asked slowly. She understood the question even before he finished it. She met his eyes, her expression calm. "Because you were alive," she said simply. There was no anger in her voice, no pride, just truth. He closed his eyes, letting the meaning settle. He had expected questions, blame, or distance. Instead, he found quiet acceptance. As his strength slowly grew, so did awareness of danger. Sounds traveled far across the open land. A distant shout, the echo of hooves, even the movement of birds could signal trouble. The woman became more watchful. She kept the shelter hidden, adjusting branches and cloth to blend with the land. She spoke little, but her actions were quick and sure. One afternoon, while the cowboy rested, she returned to find him trying to stand. His legs trembled and his balance failed. He fell back onto the ground with a quiet sound of frustration. She moved to him immediately, placing a steady hand on his shoulder, not to scold him, but to remind him he was not ready. "Slow," she said. He nodded, ashamed of his impatience. Survival had taught him many lessons, but waiting was the hardest. That evening he asked her name. She hesitated, then gave it. He repeated it softly, careful to say it correctly. She corrected him once, then let it be. He told her his name too. It felt strange to hear it spoken again, like a piece of his old life reaching across the silence. Trust grew not through long talks, but through shared quiet, through the passing of water, through the way she adjusted the shelter when the wind changed, through the way he stopped pushing himself when she warned him. One night, distant voices carried on the air. The woman froze, listening. The cowboy saw the change in her posture and felt fear return sharply. She moved quickly, signaling him to stay still. She pulled the cloth tighter, dimming the light inside the shelter. Outside, the voices passed without stopping, fading slowly into the dark. Only when the land grew quiet again did she relax. "That was close," the cowboy whispered. She nodded. "Too close." After that, she knew they could not stay much longer. Even hidden, nothing remained unseen forever. The cowboy sensed the shift. He pushed himself to do more, slowly and carefully, sitting longer, standing with support, taking short steps inside the shelter. Pain returned at times, sharp reminders of how fragile he still was. But each day, his body answered him with small signs of strength. He watched the woman care for her child as well. The baby was calm, unaware of danger or hardship. That sight filled him with something close to sorrow and respect. She carried responsibility heavier than any injury he bore. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he spoke again. "I owe you my life," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, then replied, "Life is not owned." The words stayed with him. By the end of the week, he could walk short distances outside the shelter, leaning on a stick she had made for him. The land felt vast and new again, but also threatening. He saw it now with different eyes. He knew leaving would come soon. He did not know how or where he would go, only that staying would put her and her child at risk. The woman knew it too. They did not speak of it yet, but the silence between them carried the truth clearly. The land had spared him once. It would not be kind forever. And somewhere ahead, a final choice waited for them both. The morning came with a strange feeling, the kind that sits quietly in the chest and refuses to leave. The cowboy woke before the sun fully rose, listening to the sounds of the land. Birds called from a distance. The wind moved gently across the ground. Everything seemed calm, yet his heart felt uneasy. He sat up slowly, testing his strength. His body still hurt, but it no longer felt like it would break if he moved. That alone felt like a miracle. He knew he was alive only because of the woman beside him, because of choices she had made without knowing who he truly was. The woman was already awake. She was preparing to leave the shelter, gathering her things with careful movements. Her face showed focus, not fear, but he sensed tension in her posture. "You heard something," he said softly. She nodded. "Tracks, fresh." His stomach tightened. He knew what that meant. People were moving nearby. Whether they were settlers, travelers, or others, it did not matter. His presence alone could bring danger to her and her child. They both understood this without needing to speak much more. She handed him the walking stick and helped him stand. Outside, the land stretched wide and open. In the distance, dust rose faintly, almost invisible to anyone who did not know how to look. "They will come closer," she said. "Not today, but soon." He swallowed. "Then I should leave." Her eyes met his. For a moment she said nothing. Then she nodded once. Yes, the word felt heavy, even though he knew it was right. They spent the day preparing quietly. She packed what little she could spare for him, a small amount of dried food wrapped tightly. A container with water, filled just enough to help him reach the next place. She showed him how to keep the container shaded so the water would last longer. He watched her hands as she worked, steady and sure. These hands had saved him. These hands belonged to someone who had known hardship all her life and still chose mercy. As the sun climbed higher, his thoughts grew restless. He wanted to say many things but did not know how to put them into words that would be enough. When the time came, they stood outside the shelter together. The baby slept against her chest, peaceful and unaware. The sight filled him with respect and sadness. He knew that everything she did carried weight beyond herself. "I don't know how to repay you," he said. She shook her head. "There is no debt." He nodded, though part of him still struggled to accept it. She pointed toward a distant line of hills. "Follow that way, walk slow, rest when your body tells you." "I will," he promised. They stood in silence for a long moment. The land seemed to hold its breath. Then, without ceremony, he turned and began to walk. Each step took effort. His body protested, reminding him of how close he had come to dying. But he kept moving, leaning on the stick, breathing steadily. He did not look back at first. He feared that if he did, he might lose the strength to continue. When he finally did turn, she was still there, watching until he was far enough that his leaving no longer endangered her. He lifted his hand in a small gesture of farewell. She nodded once in return. The land swallowed the distance between them. The journey was harder than he expected. Even with the supplies she gave him, the heat and distance tested him. He rested often, remembering her advice. He spoke her words in his mind, using them to keep himself steady. At night, he slept under the open sky. The stars reminded him of the nights he had spent near her shelter, suspended between life and death. He wondered if she looked at the same sky and thought of him, or if her focus had already returned fully to survival. After 2 days of slow travel, he saw signs of life. Smoke rising faintly, tracks crossing the land. He knew he was close to people. When he finally reached a small settlement, he collapsed near its edge. Voices rose, people gathered. Hands lifted him, carrying him away from the dust. As he drifted in and out of awareness, he heard questions. He answered some, left others unspoken. When they asked how he survived, he said only that someone helped him. They took him in. They cleaned his wounds properly. They gave him food and water slowly, carefully. His body responded with gratitude and exhaustion. As days passed, his strength returned more fully. With it came memories that refused to fade. He saw her face often in his thoughts. He heard her voice, calm and firm. He remembered the way she chose action over fear. People around him spoke of conflict, of danger, of dividing lines between lives. He listened, but his heart felt distant from those words now. He knew the truth in a deeper way. He had seen kindness where he was told there would be none. He had lived because of it. When he was strong enough, he left the settlement. He did not return to the life he once knew. Instead, he chose work that kept him moving, helping where he could, staying close to the land but never taking more than needed. Sometimes, he traveled near the area where he had nearly died. He never searched openly. He never asked questions that might bring trouble. He respected her need for safety and distance, but he remembered. Years passed. The story of a dying cowboy saved by an Apache widow became something he carried quietly. He shared it only when needed, only when he saw fear or hatred shaping someone's view of the world. He told it simply, without exaggeration, without pride. He told it as a truth about survival, mercy, and the quiet strength of one woman who chose to save a life when it would have been easier to walk away. And though he never saw her again, her choice stayed with him, shaping the man he became. The land moved on. So did they. But what happened between them remained, carried not by words or reward, but by a life that continued when it should have ended. Time passed in a quiet, steady way, the kind of time that does not announce itself but changes everything. The cowboy healed fully, though some pain never truly left him. On cold mornings, his ribs reminded him of the fall. On long walks, his legs stiffened. These were small prices to pay for being alive. He settled into a simple life. He worked with animals, guided travelers through difficult land, and helped where he could. He did not chase trouble, and he did not speak loudly about his past. But when people asked why he was different from other men of the frontier, he had no clear answer. He only knew that something inside him had shifted forever. At night, when the world grew quiet, his thoughts often returned to that hidden shelter. He remembered the smell of earth and smoke, the sound of careful footsteps, the calm presence that never left him alone with fear. He remembered how close death had felt, and how life had been handed back to him without demand. He wondered about the woman often. He wondered if she and her child were safe. He wondered if she still lived near the edge of the settlement, choosing distance over attention. He hoped the land had been kind to her, though he knew kindness was rare. He carried her lesson with him wherever he went. When someone spoke with anger, he listened instead. When someone was weak, he slowed down. When fear tried to guide his actions, he remembered how one quiet choice had changed everything. Years later, he found himself helping a young man who had collapsed from heat and hunger. Others stood back, unsure what to do. The cowboy knelt beside him, gave water slowly, and stayed until the danger passed. No one noticed anything special about it. That was the point. Life, he had learned, did not always need witnesses. As he grew older, the frontier changed. Roads appeared where dust once ruled. Small towns grew louder and busier. Stories of the past were replaced by new ones. Many people forgot the hard lessons of survival. He did not. Sometimes, around a fire, someone would speak badly of those who were different, those who lived beyond familiar lines. The cowboy would stay quiet until the moment felt right. Then he would tell his story. He never named the woman. He never shared details that could bring harm. He spoke only of a time when he was helpless and someone chose mercy. He spoke of how life had been saved not by strength but by care. Some listened. Some did not. That was also part of life. Far away, the Apache widow continued her days. Her child grew, learned to walk, learned to listen to the land. She taught the child how to find water, how to read the wind, how to stay unseen when needed. She never spoke much about the cowboy. To her, what she had done was not a story. It was simply a moment when life had asked something of her, and she had answered. She carried no regret. She did not seek praise. She lived as she always had, guided by the belief that life mattered, even when it came from a place of danger. There were moments when she thought of him, usually when she saw a stranger traveling alone. She wondered if he had survived. She hoped he had found peace. Then she returned her focus to the present, where her child needed her, where the land demanded attention. Both lives moved forward, shaped quietly by a shared past. One winter, the cowboy fell ill. Age and long years had worn him down. He lay in a small room, listening to the wind outside. As strength left him again, memories returned with surprising clarity. He was not afraid this time. He thought of the land, wide and open. He thought of the shelter, the silence, the steady care. He thought of how close he had come to ending and how life had continued instead. When a friend sat beside him and asked if he had any regrets, he shook his head slowly. "I was given more time than I deserved," he said, "and I tried to use it well." Those were his last clear words. After he was gone, his story did not disappear. It lived quietly in the hearts of those who had listened. It lived in small acts of kindness passed from one person to another. It lived in the understanding that survival was not only about strength, but about choice. The frontier kept changing. New generations walked the land without knowing its old dangers, but the truth remained, steady and simple. Once a dying man was saved not by force, not by reward, but by compassion when there was nothing else to give. And because of that choice, a life continued, a story continued, a lesson continued. The land remembered even if people forgot. And somewhere between the dust and the sky, the quiet bond between two strangers remained, untouched by time.